Hey, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about employee handbooks, the 60-page dry legal documents that not only protect your business, but set the standards to how your business operates. I know they're not fun, they're not exciting, but they are so extremely important. And I'm here to tell you all about why they're important. I can't tell you how many founders that I connect with who are either using an old template from, that they downloaded from the internet years ago, or I've heard this a lot too, business programs that they were a part of, providing them with handbook templates from 10 to 15 years ago. And I think that these are great places to start. Don't want to knock that. I also see a lot of just like, random Google Docs that are just thrown together. Like, we do things this way. Great. Again, great places to start, but they're not really hitting all the marks when it comes to making sure you have a compliant handbook. So today, we're fixing that, hopefully. So why does a handbook matter more than you think? Number one, it is your first line of legal protection. I know that a lot of people already know that, but it not only protects you, the business, it also protects your employees. So protection all around. Number two, it sets the standard for how every employee is treated. There's no more one-off decision making on how to handle a situation because you have policies that reflect that and set that standard for everyone on your team so that you can treat everybody fair and equitably. And number three, without it, every decision is made in the moment, like I just said. So that really opens you up to claims for unfair treatment or, just a lot of unnecessary back and forth. A lot of he said, she said, a lot of, well, they got this. Why can't I get that? So again, we want to avoid all of these things, right? And by putting in that legwork in advance, you're going to get to that end game solution of just having the standard set for everybody. So let's talk a little bit about things that the handbook has to include, because there's some must-haves for sure. It has to include an at-will statement, which means that employees can leave at any time. They're not under contract. Most states are at will, and at will employment means that you can also let somebody go at any time. Now, do I think that's a good idea? No, because there are proper ways to do it and proper things to do in advance. But at the end of the day, at will does mean that. Anti-harassment and discrimination policies, extremely important. Hopefully, I don't have to be too specific on why those are important. From an ethical standpoint, everybody should be treated fairly and equally, but also it's against the law to discriminate, especially when it comes to protected classes. Also, leave policy is extremely important, and it depends on where you're located. So, a lot of leave policies were put in place in the past few years in a bunch of states. So if you have a document from years back, it's most likely not up to date and not reflecting what current policies are mandatory where you're located. So leave policies could be PTO, sick time, parental leave, bereavement leave. There's a lot of stuff you can do. There's stuff that's mandatory. There's stuff that you can get really creative about, which we'll talk about in a few. But leave policies are extremely important, and it must cover where your business operates. Code of conduct and performance expectations are so important. Code of conduct is how people ethically operate within your business, right? So it's, you can have a whole list of reasons that go against your code of conduct. And I've seen, unfortunately, people be terminated for going against those for reasons such as like theft or dishonest, use of company property, or unfortunately, there's so many things that can happen, but having a code of conduct is really important, as well as performance expectations. And also, what does it look like if somebody is not reaching their fullest potential in performance? Do they go through, a performance improvement plan? Are there coaching aspects involved here? What steps do people need to take if they're suffering in their performance? And some state specific requirements. This is honestly where templates fall short. So I know I mentioned leave policies before, but there are so many things that are in effect in so many different places. Pay transparency law, safety for pregnant workers. I think Rhode Island passed protections around menopause in the workplace. So a lot of states have different things that are required, which really makes an employee handbook a little challenging if you're trying to do it yourself. You need to be conscious of where your people are, where they're working, what states they're working in. So it may not all be just where you're located. So you might need to have different addendums. You might need to create policies that encompass all of those. This is why it's really important to work with a professional on this. Some things that I really love to do. So those are some of the standards, right? But I also really like to work with businesses to make it more their own and unique to them. So obviously there are legal requirements that we need in there. There are things that you should have in there that are just like great safety, like dress code is the best example for this. I feel like I've worked with so many businesses who are just so super casual and they're like, we'll never need a dress code policy. But then they've run into issues where somebody will come to work wearing something completely inappropriate or like really offensive. And so even though you don't have a specific dress code, it's still good to have a dress code policy in place where you can say, employees are allowed to dress comfortably and respectfully. Here are some items, if we deem it offensive, no, don't show certain areas of your body. Like there are ways that you can set parameters, but still not tell people exactly what to wear. But, just like every policy, you need to make sure that you're protecting people when it comes to, their appearance, right? There are protected classes when it comes to certain garments, to certain hairstyles. And so you do want to make sure that you are creating these policies in a fair and compliant way. And there's so many different angles to look at it from. But that's I feel like dress code comes up so much with small businesses where they're like, we don't need that. And then unfortunately, I've seen people actually need it. But some of the other things that are really fun to get to build out, mission, vision, values, right? Starting off with a really great introduction to your business so that, when your employees sign on board, they have a full understanding of what you're all about, what they're working towards, what kind of business they're joining. I think it's also really important to think about some creative benefits that you can offer. So maybe you're too small to offer like health insurance, maybe you can't afford it, which I completely understand. A lot of small businesses cannot afford to offer health insurance, unfortunately. That is a rant and rabbit hole for another day. I find it absolutely ridiculous that healthcare is unaffordable. But again, moving on. But what are some unique benefits you could do that reflect your business? Is it something where you really care about your team's mental health and you do volunteer opportunities in the mental health field or mandatory mental health days, or maybe you sign up with a service that gives them, free access, certain amount of sessions to mental health providers. Think about what's really important to your business. I've also seen, if you work in retail, is there an allowance you could give to your team members annually that they can spend on products within the store? That's an amazing benefit, an amazing perk. And there's so many things you could do to get creative that's unique to your business. So I really love working with businesses on that. That's one of my favorite parts of the handbook. Try to make it a little more fun, add little bits of nuggets in there that keeps people actually reading it, because the goal is you want people to review it, sign off on it, keep that on file so that it's a clear understanding. Everybody's on the same page. So what makes a handbook that people actually use? It's so difficult because, people do sign employee handbooks when they're hired. Now, I don't have any statistics on this, but I can pretty much guarantee you that like 25% of people will actually read the entire document before signing. And those are your type A people. Everyone else will most likely go to it, if they go to it, when they have a question and when they have an issue. And I think that that's still a really important piece of it because it does eliminate the back and forth questions. Even if somebody comes to you and say, hey, what's our policy on time off? You can say, oh, great question. It's in the handbook. Check it out on page blank. So that this way you're just directing people and eventually they'll understand to just look there themselves instead of asking you. So I do think that it's a really good resource. And also for you as a business owner and a leader, if you forget something like bereavement, right? Let's say you gave people 5 days of bereavement, per instance, but you don't remember what you said. That happens a lot. Like, what did I decide? Go check your handbook. I've seen so many times where employers don't have policies like this and don't have handbooks, and then they kind of wing it when they're asked questions. And this really creates a lot of tension because they may accidentally be treating people unfairly by saying, yeah, take 5 days, totally. And then the next person, they're like, what did I say? What did I tell that last person? Sure, take 3 days. And then they're like, well, that person got 5. Why am I only getting 3? And then you might have a unfair discrimination claim on your hands, So it's really important to set your standards. And the thing about a handbook too, if it's a policy that's not mandatory, you can update it. If you put something in place and you're like, honestly, this isn't working, you can change it. You can update it. It grows with your business. I know a lot of people have that fear that like, once I make this decision, I can never go back. You can change it. There are ways to do it. There are ways to communicate that to the team so that they're brought along on the process. There are ways to do it. So don't feel like you're absolutely bound to it. If you create something now that you're not sure how it will grow with you in a few years. So I would say, make sure that you're, a lot of the mandatory policies can read very legalese, right? And so I think it's important to pepper in some more plain language policies that people can understand, that they can relate to, and that they actually use. It's also really important to have people review and sign during onboarding and keep it on file. If you're using a payroll system, most of them allow you to do it through there where people can re-off and sign before they're even able to get paid as a part of their onboarding paperwork. That is always my recommendation, so that you have like a time-stamped signed documentation in their file in a payroll system. And, it's an understanding that they, even if they didn't necessarily read the entire thing, they have agreed to it. Make sure to update and review it at least annually. And the reason for this, I know it's super annoying. I find it annoying too, personally. Things change constantly, and they're changing, on micro scales. They're changing in like specific cities and towns and counties, not just statewide. So it is a lot to pay attention to. And there usually is like at least 1 or 2 updates between the federal and local levels. So make sure you're touching base on that at least annually. Generally, I'll say like beginning of the year is a good time to refresh. If you make any updates, send it back out for an e-cig in, not an e-cig like a cigarette, an e-signature through your payroll platform. And then also make sure it reflects your culture. I really like when businesses brand it, right? So at least maybe if some of the policies are dry, it visually looks like their company. That's again why I loved having that like mission, vision, values in the beginning, a history of the business. I also think it's really good, if you have this works really well for businesses that are in person, like customer facing. So let's say you're like a retail store or a cafe or a restaurant, having, the front page kind of be your day-to-day policies that you need to know. and having like a little blurb then with the page number on the full policy, so that it's essentially like an intro to what they need for their day to day. So that could be where they clock in, right? What the schedule is for the business, right? Like we're open Monday through Saturday, this time to this time, shifts may vary, see full policy on page 25. Or, if you need to call out sick, here is the process. Here's how you accrue sick time, full policy on page 35. So sometimes it's nice to have that like snippet in the beginning to get people like their quick answers on that first page, and then they can kind of dig through for the rest. And I work with businesses on this. I know employment lawyers do it, HR consultants do it. I personally offer this service to people as well. What I like to do first is I start with a questionnaire that I have the business owner fill out. And it asks a lot of questions about the policies that you can really like build and make your own. I also ask for any existing stuff so we can build off of that. But, things like time off policies, right? Like, do you offer PTO? If you don't, would you like to? I can absolutely give you recommendations on, generally what people do, what the standards are, but also we can do what you want with things like that. So I like to be very collaborative and make it very unique, and then pepper those unique collaborative policies in with the rest of the stuff that's mandated, to make it, a little less dry. So I think it's really important to have a handbook, even if you have one employee. If you have one employee, you absolutely need to start creating your employee handbook. And that's because, again, it protects you, the business, because you have the policies out there that you need. And it also protects you from making mistakes and telling people different things so that you're able to consistently treat people fairly. Again, it also protects the employee to say, here is what is expected of me. Here are my rights. And they're able to use that as a reference and a resource also. It also is a time saver. So you can direct people to it instead of having to think of the answers, find the answers, all of that. So I really do think it's important, even if you have one employee. And I do these as one-offs, but I also do them as a part of my 3-month project with businesses where I start out. If you don't have employees, we take a look at what your business needs are. We build out job descriptions. We build out the structure of your business from a people side, right? So that is not only job descriptions, interviews, how do you choose the right people, but it's also tactical stuff like getting you set up on the right payroll system that's right for you and making sure it automatically does all the things you need it to do. So as a part of that, I create the employee handbook, feed it through your brand new system, set up your onboarding flow so that you don't have to be tracking people down for bits and pieces of it. It's actually really fun to get that whole back end set up. So if you're interested, you have the need for this, make sure to DM me or comment below handbook, or grab the link below to set up a discovery call, because honestly, employee handbooks are super important. Until next time.